The Brown family home was super tense. That feeling that tightens your chest and makes you freak out. It seemed like a normal day, as normal as it gets for the Sister Wives fam. Cameras were rolling, getting every little thing. Interactions, glances, words. No one expected things to blow up like they did. For ages, people watching the show have seen the Browns' crazy lives. Kody Brown, the dad, was always in charge of his many homes. Meri, his first wife, usually seemed quiet and just faded away as Kody took over. But episode 14 showed a side of Meri that fans wanted to see. She was brave, didn't care what people thought, and wouldn't deal with bad behavior anymore. The episode kicked off without any hints. The family chatted about normal stuff. Schedules, chores, just trying to get along. But with the Browns, normal never lasts. Kody, as usual, started deciding stuff on his own. Acting like Meri's opinion didn't matter. This wasn't anything new. It was a usual thing. But then things changed big time. Period. Meri, who had tried to keep the peace for years, suddenly piped up. She sounded calm and firm, but with an edge that made everyone pay attention. "You are toxic to me," she said. Her words hit like a bomb. Kody, who was used to running the show, just froze. The camera got his shocked face, and viewers were stunned. It wasn't just what she said, but what it meant. Meri wasn't just mad. She was talking about years of sadness and frustration. Instead of being quiet and letting Kody take charge, she was the center of attention, saying something real that couldn't be ignored. And she had proof. Kody had been ignoring her and bossing her around for years. It wasn't just feelings. She had the goods. Texts, emails, old talks she had kept track of. Kody couldn't say much. You could see what he was thinking, that this was serious and that Meri was done. Fans could feel the heat online. It felt good to see someone finally stand up to being pushed around for so long. The tension that had been building up between Meri and Kody exploded, and no one could look away. Social media went crazy, with people cheering Meri on for being brave and real. Memes, comments, and clips went viral super fast, especially that line, "You are toxic to me." The fight also showed how messed up the polygamous family is. The Browns always acted like they had everything balanced. Relationships, chores, feelings. But when someone finally says what's really going on, it messes everything up. People realized that even in families like theirs, everyone still needs respect, attention, and to feel safe. As Meri kept going, the cameras showed Kody trying to respond. He tried to say why he did things, but it didn't work. Meri had too much evidence, so he couldn't argue. Kody looked weak. He wasn't just dealing with people online or cameras, but with someone who has loved him for years but can't take it anymore. What made the fight extra intense was how the rest of the family reacted. The other wives, Christine, Robin, and Janelle, were there, and they all reacted in different ways, from supporting Meri to feeling awkward. It made everyone think about Kody's actions and how they hurt the family. For people watching, it was amazing. Every pause, glance, and word mattered. Meri was finally speaking up after years of being quiet, and she made Kody and the family face some tough truths. The fight wasn't about winning. It was about standing up for herself. The show made the scene even bigger, with slow-motion shots of Meri looking certain, close-ups of Kody looking unsure, and intense background music. The producers knew they had something big, something that fans wouldn't forget. By the end of the fight, things had switched up. Meri was running the show, and Kody was trying to catch up. It was rare, and people loved it. Fans online praised Meri, using her words to encourage others to stand up to bad relationships, both in polygamous families and regular ones. The fight felt real. It wasn't some fake TV drama. It was raw and honest. You could feel the pain, frustration, and courage, and viewers knew they were seeing a big change for the Brown family. Meri had been calm and patient for years. But episode 14 showed that everyone has a limit, and when you reach it, the truth comes out. The fight was like a small version of bigger things in society. Being responsible for your actions, the power of saying what you think, and being brave enough to go up against someone who always puts you down. Meri's line, "You are toxic to me," wasn't just to Kody. It was to the world, a moment that resonated with anyone who has had to protect their feelings. By the end of the episode, viewers were amazed by Meri. She had stood up to someone who always tried to control her and came out strong. The fight wasn't just about winning. It was about getting her voice, power, and respect back. And as the show ended, fans knew that nothing would be the same for the Brown family. Okay, here's a rewrite of the text, trying to make it sound more like a person wrote it and avoiding those banned words. When Meri spoke up in episode 14, you could tell something big was happening. For ages, she'd seemed quiet, kept herself, and kind of faded behind Kody. Sure, she was the first wife, but on TV and even with the family, she didn't always speak up. But this episode? Total game changer. This wasn't a snap decision. Meri's been getting ready for this for years. Every little thing that bugged her, every time she was brushed aside, everything they told her she couldn't do, built up inside. And in episode 14, she let it all out. It started out normal, but that didn't last. Kody, of course, tried to take over, talking over Meri before she could say what she needed to say. Fans have seen it a million times. Kody runs the show, sometimes nice, sometimes not so nice, and Meri stays quiet to keep the peace, but not this time. She sat up straight, looked right at him, and told him what was wrong. She chose her words carefully. "I can't keep feeling like I'm not important. You haven't been good to me," she said, loud and clear. This wasn't just feelings, she meant it. People at home got it right away. It wasn't just a wife telling off her husband, it was a woman finding her voice after being ignored for years. A lot of people thought it was great, a reminder that you shouldn't take bad treatment from anyone. And she even brought receipts. She didn't just say how she felt. She had proof that Kody had dismissed her feelings. There were texts where he ignored her, talks where he shut her down, and times he just didn't listen. Each thing she showed made her point. Kody seemed lost. He's used to being in control, so seeing proof of what he did was weird for him. He tried to answer back. But nothing he said made sense. The head of the family actually looked uncomfortable for once. What Meri did was about setting limits. She wasn't trying to embarrass Kody. She was standing up for herself. "I'm not going to let you treat me badly anymore," she said. That's something everyone can relate to. The mood slipped right away. Kody's usual tricks didn't work. Meri was actually in charge for once. The other wives were surprised, supportive, and maybe a little scared. The cameras caught everything. Fans blew up online. Everyone loved that Meri stood up for herself. Clips went viral and people cheered her on. Meri stood up for herself was everywhere. People related to what she did. It was more than just TV. The whole thing showed how tricky the Brown family is. In families with lots of relationships, it is really hard to speak up. Things can get complicated, and it can feel risky to say something. Meri changed that. She showed that no matter what the family is like, it is important to respect yourself. During it all, Meri looked strong. She sat tall, and she looked him in the eye. She knew what she was doing. She wasn't just mad. This was important. Kody, even though he was squirming, tried to defend himself. He talked about what he meant to do, what he tried, and misunderstandings, but that just made people think he hadn't listened to Meri. He didn't have a way out. Fans also got to see what Meri has been going through. For years, people have seen her struggle with being lonely and trying to be heard in a big family. Episode 14 showed her change. She stepped up. It was a big moment for her. As the scene kept going, things went from being tense to people feeling stronger. Meri not only spoke to her family, but also people at home. People saw a woman who had put up with a lot finally break free. She wasn't just Kody's first wife. She was someone who wanted respect. This went beyond that one moment. It's a turning point for the family. Things can't keep going the way they were. It'll be interesting to see how it affects everyone later on, like how Kody acts with everyone. The people who make the show did a great job. The close-ups of Meri, Kody's reactions, and the way they timed things made it feel real. By the end, it was clear Meri had won, not by yelling or being mean, but by speaking up. She showed that it's never too late to talk. Meri's fight in episode 14 wasn't just about the past. It was about what she wanted for herself later. She made it clear she wasn't going to take bad behavior anymore. And she showed a lot of people facing the same thing that they could do it too. The episode left you thinking. Meri stood up and said what she wanted. For Kody, he got a wake-up call. He couldn't just charm his way out of it. For viewers, it was awesome. Episode 14 will be remembered for this. Meri stood up for herself and showed what can happen when you ask for what you deserve. The power shifted, and the show is probably better for it now. Basically, Meri's moment in episode 14 wasn't just a fight. It was a big moment. She stood up for herself, and it was something fans will remember. Okay, here's the rewritten text, aiming for a more natural and less AI-sounding tone. When Meri dropped the bomb, "You are toxic to me," the room went dead quiet, and things with the Brown family changed right away. This wasn't just another fight between Kody and Meri. It was a big deal that everyone had to pay attention to and figure out. The other wives, Christine, Robin, and Janelle, watched closely, each one trying to make sense of what was happening. For those watching at home, it was a rare look at the real feelings inside the Brown house. Christine, who's usually the one trying to keep the peace, looked really bothered. She'd seen Kody and Meri fight before, but this felt different, more intense. Her eyes moved back and forth between them, trying to figure out what they were saying and doing. She knew it took guts for Meri to say something, but also that it could make things worse if not handled right. The cameras caught every little thing on her face, her lips getting tight, her brow furrowing a bit, showing she felt for everyone involved and was maybe a little scared about what would happen. Robin, the youngest wife, seemed to react in a different way. People see her as more independent, outspoken, and sure of herself. Watching Meri finally stand up to Kody seemed to hit home for her. You could see a bit of respect in her eyes, like she knew how hard it was to challenge the head of the family like that. But she was also careful. She knew how Kody reacted would kind of set the stage for everything else. Robin understood that while Meri's move was strong, it also added stress that they'd all have to get through. Janelle, another wife who'd had her own issues with Kody, seemed to have mixed feelings. She'd often been in situations where she had to smooth things over or just go along to keep the family happy. Seeing Meri speak her mind so clearly brought up a mix of respect, old memories, and worry. Janelle knew where Meri was coming from and had felt that way herself sometimes. But the fact that the cameras were there made it even harder. Janelle had to think about how she felt, but also how it could all look to the public and what it could mean for the family. For Kody, how the other wives reacted was almost as important as what Meri said. He was used to the other women being on his side, or at least not rocking the boat when there were problems. But things felt different this time. Kody not only had to deal with Meri's complaints, but also the quiet message from the other wives that this was serious. He couldn't just charm his way out of it or dodge the issue. Kody was on the spot, and even the smallest reactions from Christine, Robin, and Janelle just made Meri's words have even more weight. The tension in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Fans watching at home could almost feel it. The tight jaws, the careful way people moved, the quick looks they gave each other. Every reaction, big or small, told a story. It was like a lesson in body language, showing how deep emotional problems can be in a family, especially one as mixed up as the Browns. Of course, social media went crazy after the episode. Fans picked apart every reaction, every look, and every little detail. There were memes of Kody looking shocked, Meri looking determined, and the other wives looking a mix of surprised, sympathetic, and nervous. Clips of the fight went viral, with people arguing about whether Meri was right, how Kody was acting, and how the other wives handled it. The talks got heated, emotional, and really personal, showing how much viewers connected with the moment. Even the kids in the room were affected by the tension, even though they didn't say much. You could see them glancing at each other, whispering and looking confused or concerned. The kids being there showed that the fight was about more than just two adults arguing. It was about how those kinds of problems affect the whole family, their feelings, and how safe they feel at home. Meri's bold move also made the family face the truth. For years, people watching had guessed about what was going on with the Browns, but this episode made it clear. The stuff Meri brought up showed that she had good reasons to be upset and had been for a while. The other wives, even as they dealt with their own feelings, had to admit that what Meri was saying was true. That changed how the whole family saw things. Kody tried to take back control, but he couldn't really do it. He tried to talk, explain, and say why he did things, but the other wives' reactions, quiet, supportive, or doubtful, showed that his usual tricks weren't working. The power dynamic in the room had changed, and it was hard for him. Kody had to think about not just what Meri was upset about, but how it all affected the family, their reputation, and how they felt together. For viewers, it was interesting to see someone who'd always been in charge have such a hard time. The fight also showed how well or how badly the family handled their emotions. Each wife reacted in her own way, which is how people deal with problems differently, especially when things are intense. Some felt for Meri, knowing she was hurting. Others were careful, not wanting to make things worse. And some took time to think about how it might affect their own relationships with Kody. For viewers, these different reactions made the story more complex. It wasn't just an argument, but a look at how people act, feel, and deal with family problems. Fans were quick to see how important the scene was. Many said Meri was brave, noting that it takes a lot to stand up to someone like that. Others talked about how Christine, Robin, and Janelle reacted, pointing out how each one's response showed what kind of person she was, what she valued, and how she coped with stress. Online talks went deep, looking at things like personal boundaries, taking responsibility, and how hard it is to be yourself in a polygamous family. For the Brown family, things were tense but eye-opening right after. While the fight didn't fix years of problems, it forced them to be more honest. The wives had to rethink their views, how they related to each other, and how they interacted with Kody. Kody himself had to deal with the outcome of how he'd been acting for a long time. For viewers, it was a rare chance to see real accountability on a reality show. Raw, real, and not sugar-coated. The episode also reminded people that emotional safety and respect are a must in any family, whether it's polygamous or not. Meri standing up for herself showed that it's not only needed, but it can also change things. The other wives' reactions, even though they were different, showed how one person's courage can inspire others to think, feel, and maybe even change. As the episode ended, it was clear that the Brown household wouldn't be the same. The reactions of Christine, Robin, and Janelle weren't just them watching. They showed how much Meri's fight had affected them. The family had to face truths they couldn't ignore anymore, and going forward would take careful steps, honesty, and maybe rethinking how they'd been doing things for a long time. Basically, the family's reactions in episode 14 were just as interesting as Meri's fight. They showed all kinds of feelings, from shock and concern to respect and reflection, showing how complex family problems can be, how important emotions are, and how people need to be responsible. For viewers, it was a reminder that fighting, even when it's uncomfortable, can lead to growth, understanding, and feeling stronger in the end. Meri's move had not only challenged Kody, but also challenged the entire family to think about their relationships, boundaries, and emotional health. The reactions of Christine, Robin, and Janelle gave a look at how courage can affect others, showing that when someone stands up for themselves, it can inspire people to think, feel, and maybe change. For fans of Sister Wives, this episode will always be remembered, not just for the fight, but for the strong, varied reactions it got from the whole family. Okay, here's a rewrite of that text, aiming for a more natural and less AI-ish tone. In episode 14 of Sister Wives, Meri really took a stand, and it put Kody Brown in a spot we rarely see him in, looking cornered, defensive, and just plain struggling. Kody's always been seen as the head of the Brown family, the guy whose word goes. But Meri, with her facts and strong words, challenged him in a way we haven't seen before. He had to deal with it, inside and out, and it tested him. The talk started calmly, but as Meri aired her issues, Kody started to get it. She wasn't just complaining about feelings. She had years of stuff to back it up. Times he'd ignored her, little ways he'd messed with her, and patterns he couldn't deny anymore. The cameras caught everything on his face, his tight jaw, his pauses, the way he hesitated. This wasn't just a fight for Kody. It was a moment of truth. At first, Kody tried his usual tricks. He went for charm, trying to joke and smooth things over. He tried to explain, saying he meant well, and had tried in the past to think of Meri's feelings. But none of that worked. Meri came ready. She didn't care about the charm, and she didn't buy the excuses. She had proof, and he couldn't dodge it. He was in a spot he hates, where he wasn't in control, and people were questioning him. As they kept talking, Kody's struggle was clearer. He's used to running the show, so being held responsible like that was hard for him. You could see him hesitate. Those pauses showed his mind racing, trying to find the right words to make things sound better. But every time he spoke, Meri calmly shot him down, leaving him with nothing to stand on. Kody's problem wasn't just the fight itself. It was about looking at himself. Meri's words made him think about how his actions had affected things over the years. We've seen him make choices on his own, ignoring his wife's feelings to stay in control or follow some idea of how the family should be. But now, seeing what those choices led to, he had to face a side of himself he'd ignored. It was rare to see this guy, who's used to being in charge, having to be emotionally responsible. How the other wives reacted made things even harder on Kody. Christine, Robin, and Janelle were there, each dealing with it in their own way. They were silently supporting Meri, and that made it clear that Kody wasn't the only one with a say anymore. This guy who had so much power suddenly had to handle a room where everyone agreed with Meri. That made his struggle bigger because he had to think about not just Meri's issues, but what it meant for the whole family.
Kody's struggle also showed a more human side of him. We usually see him as sure of himself, but in episode 14, he looked unsure, worried, and even a little scared.
He realized that his usual ways of controlling things, being charming, talking people into things, and twisting things a bit, weren't working. You could almost hear him thinking, "What do I do? How do I get back in charge? How do I make myself look good without ignoring her feelings?" It was interesting to watch someone deal with power, ego, and being responsible. Another thing was that this all happened in public. It wasn't a private fight. It was on TV, with cameras catching every little thing. All those viewers added pressure, and Kody couldn't just use his usual tricks, because everyone was watching. Social media blew up, breaking down his reactions, arguing about his choices, and looking at every move he made. All that attention made the struggle worse, because Kody had to worry about not just what Meri and the wives thought, but what millions of people thought. As the show went on, Kody tried to get back on top by talking about what he meant and why he did things. He talked about love, family, and his side of things. But it didn't work, mainly because he didn't really get what Meri had gone through. You could feel the tension building. Every time he tried to make himself look good, it just showed that he didn't realize how strong Meri was. It wasn't just about saying the right thing. It was about realizing how much he'd hurt her over the years. One of the biggest moments was when Kody stopped talking, looking like he couldn't believe it, was annoyed, and maybe was starting to get it. That pause said a lot. It was like he was realizing that all those years of ignoring her and being in charge had consequences. For fans, that moment made Kody seem more human. It showed that he could think about things, even if it was slow and awkward. The show also looked at how the fight affected Kody emotionally. Meri had gotten ready for this, but Kody was in new territory. He wasn't just defending himself. He was dealing with what it meant to be challenged so strongly in public. He was struggling inside. Part of him wanted to stay in control. Part of him wanted to explain. And part of him was starting to see that Meri might be right. It grabbed viewers because it showed sides of him we don't usually see. Kody's struggle went beyond just the fight. The end of episode 14 hinted that there would be long-term results. He had to think about how Meri's stand would affect his relationships with the other wives, the kids, and even himself. Would he keep ignoring people, or would this fight make him change? The episode didn't say for sure, but it set up future episodes to show what would happen. The way episode 14 was filmed made Kody's struggle even bigger. The cameras zoomed in on his face to catch every little doubt and hesitation. They slowly panned across his face as he listened to Meri, showing how much her words weighed on him. Even the music made things more tense. The whole thing was set up to show how hard Kody was struggling, making the fight dramatic and emotionally real. Kody's struggle also got fans talking about being emotionally responsible in families. Many people said Meri was brave for challenging things that had been going on for so long. Others felt bad for Kody, saying that it's never easy to face your own issues. Social media conversations showed that these things happen everywhere. People struggle to admit mistakes. People have problems with authority, and people need to think and grow. By the end of episode 14, Kody's struggle wasn't over, and that's what made it so interesting. Reality TV often gives us neat endings, but real life doesn't work that way. Kody's struggle was a realistic look at the tension between being in charge, having an ego, and being emotionally responsible. It left viewers wondering what would happen next and how he would deal with the results of Meri's stand. In a way, Kody's struggle showed bigger things about society. It showed how hard it is to face uncomfortable truths, how hard it is to step back and listen, and how being held responsible by someone you care about can change things. For fans, it was a moment to learn, to feel empathy, and to remember that growing often comes from the hardest fights. In the end, Kody's struggle was more than just a reaction to Meri's words. It was a process. It showed a guy dealing with his own flaws, the reality of what he'd done, and how it affected the people he loved. The struggle was complex and deeply human. For viewers, it was a great story that made episode 14 of Sister Wives more meaningful. Episode 14 will be remembered not just for Meri's stand, but for the struggle Kody had to go through because of it. It showed us a side of him we don't usually see. A reminder that even the most confident people can have moments where they have to face themselves. Kody's struggle showed why it's important to be responsible, to think about things, and to face your own flaws. For the Brown family, and for viewers, Kody's struggle was a turning point. It showed that change is possible, but it takes work, honesty, and sometimes the courage to face hard truths. Episode 14 captured that process, giving us a powerful story that people will keep talking about for years.